The sound of a single gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Wyoming Territory. 1878, as Levi Blackett's steady hand brought down a deer at 300 yards, securing his dinner for the week ahead. The tall, broad-shouldered cowboy with sun-weathered skin and deep-set blue eyes lowered his Winchester rifle and exhaled slowly, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across his land. At 32, Levi had spent the last decade building his modest cattle ranch, 15 miles outside the growing settlement of Pineridge, with nothing but determination and calloused hands. The silence that greeted him when he pushed open the door of his 2-story farmhouse was familiar yet increasingly hollow. He'd built this place with rooms to spare, with vague notions of a family that never materialized. His boots echoed on the wooden floors as he moved through the quiet rooms, hanging his hat on the hook by the door, a small gesture of domesticity in a life defined by solitude. "Just you and me again, Duke," Levi said to the black and white border collie that trotted faithfully at his heels. The dog whined softly and pressed against his leg, as if understanding the weight of loneliness that had settled over his master these past years. Levi was preparing the deer meat in his kitchen when he heard the distant sound of wagon wheels. Visitors were rare at Raven Creek Ranch, especially as dusk approached. Duke's ears perked up and he darted to the window, barking once in alert rather than alarm. Wiping his hands on a cloth, Levi stepped onto the front porch, squinting as he made out an approaching wagon, moving slowly and erratically along the dirt road that led to his property. As it drew closer, he could see a woman at the reins, her posture slouched with exhaustion, and what appeared to be several small figures huddled in the back. The wagon listed dangerously to one side, its back left wheel clearly damaged. It came to a halt 50 yards from his home, and the woman attempted to climb down but stumbled, catching herself on the wagon's edge. Levi was moving before he'd made a conscious decision, crossing the distance in long strides. "Madam, you all right?" Up close, he could see she was young, perhaps 25, with copper hair escaping a simple bonnet, her face smudged with trail dust and eyes red-rimmed from what looked like days of exhaustion and tears. She wore a faded blue dress that had once been fine, but now showed the wear of hard travel. "Our wheel," she said, her voice hoarse. "We've been trying to reach Pineridge since yesterday, but it's been slowing us more and more." "You're still 15 miles out," Levi said, glancing at the wagon's contents. His heart sank as 5 children peered back at him with wary, tired eyes. The oldest couldn't have been more than 10, the youngest a toddler clutching a worn rag doll. "I'm Hannah," the woman said, straightening her shoulders with dignity despite her obvious distress. "Hannah Norwood, these are my children," she hesitated. "My husband died 3 weeks ago. Typhoid. We're trying to reach my cousin in Pineridge." Levi removed his hat respectfully. "Levi Blackett, madam. This is my ranch." He examined the damaged wheel, noting the splintered wood and bent iron rim. "This won't get you another mile, let alone 15. Night's coming fast, too." He looked at the children's pale, hungry faces. "You'd better stay here tonight. I can fix this wheel tomorrow and point you toward town." Relief and caution warred on Hannah's face. "I wouldn't want to impose, no imposition," Levi said firmly. "Can't leave a woman and children stranded as night falls. Not in this territory." The oldest boy, thin and serious with his mother's copper hair, climbed down from the wagon and stood protectively at Hannah's side. "I'm James," he said with a gravity that no 10-year-old should possess. "I can help with the horses, sir." Something tightened in Levi's chest at the boy's premature sense of responsibility. "Much obliged, James. Let's get your family inside first." Within the hour, Levi had transformed his quiet home into a flurry of activity. The children, James 10, Sarah 8, twins Matthew and Mark 6, and little Emma 3, explored the farmhouse with growing curiosity while Levi hastily prepared a stew with the deer meat he'd been processing. "I haven't cooked for anyone but myself in years," he apologized as Hannah helped him in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. "It might not be what you're used to." She smiled for the first time, a genuine expression that transformed her tired face. "Mr. Blackett, after days of cold beans and hardtack, anything warm will taste like a feast." Levi watched as she moved around his kitchen, bringing order and purpose to a space that had known only utilitarian use. She hummed softly as she worked, a gentle melody that seemed to fill the empty corners of the house. That night, after arranging sleeping spaces, the girls in the spare bedroom, the boys on pallets in the sitting room, and Hannah in his own room while he took the sofa, Levi lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of his house with people in it. Soft breathing, a child's murmur, the creak of floorboards as Hannah checked on her children. Duke, typically vigilant at Levi's side, had already been claimed by little Emma, who had tearfully requested the dog's company. "Never seen that traitor take to someone so quick," Levi had said, trying to mask his amazement with gruffness. Hannah had smiled apologetically. "Emma hasn't slept well since her father passed. If it's too much trouble, no trouble," Levi had assured her. "Duke's got good sense about people." Now, in the quiet darkness, Levi realized his house no longer echoed with emptiness. Instead, it seemed to hum with life, as if the walls themselves were sighing with contentment at sheltering a family. It was a dangerous thought, one that would make tomorrow's inevitable departure all the harder. Morning arrived with the scent of coffee and the sound of childish giggles. Levi opened his eyes to find little Emma standing beside the sofa, Duke at her side, both watching him with unabashed curiosity. "Mama's making breakfast," Emma announced solemnly. "She says you sleep too much." Levi sat up quickly, chagrined to discover the sun already well above the horizon. He never overslept. Years of ranch work had trained his body to rise before dawn. Yet somehow, the comfort of knowing others were under his roof had lulled him into the deepest sleep he'd had in years. In the kitchen, Hannah stood at the stove, her hair neatly braided and falling down her back. She'd found an old apron of his mother's, carefully preserved in a trunk, and wore it over her blue dress. The sight of her there, comfortable and capable, stirred something profound in Levi's chest. "I hope you don't mind," she said, noticing him in the doorway. "I found your flour stores and thought biscuits would make a proper thank you." The table was already set for 7, the children seated and surprisingly well-behaved despite their obvious hunger. James had evidently been outside, his face freshly washed but his shirt bearing signs of honest work. "I fed your horses, sir," the boy reported, "and gathered the eggs like you showed me yesterday." "You did." Levi couldn't recall the last time he'd bothered collecting eggs from the half-dozen chickens that roamed his property. Usually he only remembered every few days, finding more eggs than he could use. Breakfast was a revelation. Not because of Hannah's cooking, though her biscuits were indeed better than any Levi could manage, but because of the life around his table. The twins argued good-naturedly over who would get the largest biscuit. Sarah shyly asked Levi about his books, spotting the small shelf in the sitting room, and James spoke earnestly about the cattle he'd glimpsed in the north pasture. "I've never seen so many cows in one place," the boy admitted. "Must be hard work for just one man." "It is," Levi agreed, surprising himself with his candor. "I hire hands during roundup and branding, but the rest of the time it's just me and Duke." "Papa had a store," Matthew volunteered. He sold everything. But then he got sick, and the new doctor couldn't help him. A shadow passed over Hannah's face. "That's enough, Matthew. Mr. Blackett doesn't need to hear our troubles." "It's no trouble, Mrs. Norwood," Levi said quietly. Then, to change the subject, he added, "I'll take a look at your wagon wheel after breakfast. Should be able to get it fixed by midday." A flicker of something disappointment crossed Hannah's features before she nodded. "You've been too kind already. We've imposed enough." After breakfast, Levi examined the wagon more thoroughly and frowned. The damage was worse than he'd initially thought. The wheel wasn't just damaged, the axle had a hairline crack that he hadn't noticed in the evening light. It was a repair that would require specialized tools he didn't possess. "I can make a temporary fix," he explained to Hannah as they stood beside the wagon, "but I wouldn't trust it for 15 miles, especially not with your children aboard. The blacksmith in Pineridge could fix it proper." Hannah's shoulders slumped slightly. How long would a temporary repair last? "Maybe 5 miles if you're gentle with it and the road stays smooth, which it won't." Levi hesitated, then offered the solution that had been forming in his mind since dawn. "I'll ride into town tomorrow and bring the blacksmith back here. Jensen's a good man, he can repair it right here if I bring him." "Tomorrow?" Hannah's eyes widened. "But we can't possibly stay another—" "You can," Levi interrupted, surprising himself with his insistence. "My house has plenty of room, as you've seen, and it's the safest option for your children." Hannah studied his face as if searching for hidden motives. Finding none, she sighed. "You're right, of course. It's just we've been dependent on the kindness of strangers since Philadelphia. I had hoped our journey was nearly over." "Philadelphia?" Levi couldn't hide his surprise. "You've come all that way alone with 5 children?" "Not entirely alone. We traveled with a family heading to Denver until 2 weeks ago." Her expression clouded. "My husband Robert had a mercantile there. After he died, there was nothing left. The business had been failing for months. His partner claimed ownership of what remained, and the creditors took the rest." Levi's jaw tightened at the injustice. "And your cousin in Pineridge, what awaits you there?" "Alina runs a boarding house. She's offered us shelter until I can find work as a teacher or seamstress." "I was a teacher before I married." Hannah looked across the yard where her children were cautiously exploring the ranch under Duke's watchful eye. "They deserve stability after everything they've endured." That evening, after a day spent showing James and the twins the rudiments of ranch life, helping Sarah find books that might interest her, and watching in amazement as Hannah transformed his rudimentary kitchen supplies into another wholesome meal, Levi sat on the front porch. The spring evening was mild, the distant mountains purple against the sunset sky. Hannah joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one and settled into the second rocking chair, her presence somehow both new and strangely familiar. "Your ranch is beautiful," she said after a comfortable silence. "You've built something remarkable here, Mr. Blackett." "Levi, please," he said, finding the formality suddenly unbearable between them. "And thank you, but it's still rough around the edges." "As are most worthwhile things," Hannah replied with a small smile. "The children haven't stopped talking about today's adventures. James is particularly taken with ranching. He's always been interested in animals." Levi sipped his coffee, considering his next words carefully. "Mrs. Norwood, Hannah," she corrected gently. "Hannah, I want to make a proposition." He turned to face her directly. "Stay, not just until the wagon's fixed. Stay for the summer at least." Her eyes widened. "I don't understand. I need help around here, more than I like to admit. The house needs proper keeping. The garden's been neglected for years, and come branding season next month, having someone to cook for the hands would be worth more than I could pay." He rushed on before she could protest. You'd have the house to yourselves most days I'm out with the herd from sunup till sundown. You'd be doing me the favor." Hannah set her coffee down, her expression unreadable. "Why would you do this for strangers?" The question hung between them, forcing Levi to confront motivations he hadn't fully examined. "Because this house was built for a family," he finally said. "My father started it, dreaming of the generations that would follow. I finished it after he died, holding on to that same dream. But life had other plans." He gestured to the empty land around them. "All this means nothing without people to share it with. Your children brought this place alive in a day in ways I couldn't in 10 years. Hannah's eyes shimmered in the fading light. "It's a generous offer, but I can't accept charity. I need to stand on my own feet for my children's sake." "It isn't charity," Levi insisted. "It's an arrangement that benefits us both. You need time to establish yourself in a new place, and I need help that I'm willing to pay for. 3 months. That's all I'm asking. By summer's end, if Pineridge still seems the better option, I'll drive you there myself." He could see her weighing his words, practical considerations battling with pride and caution. Finally, she nodded slowly. 3 months, then. "As your housekeeper, not your charity case, and I'll expect fair wages that I can save toward our future." "Agreed," Levi said, extending his hand formally. When her smaller one clasped his, he felt as if something fundamental had shifted in his world, a bargain struck that might change everything. The first month passed in a blur of adjustments and discoveries. Levi rose before dawn each day to tend to the cattle, often with James eagerly at his side. The boy was a quick study, soaking up knowledge about ranch life with an enthusiasm that reminded Levi of his own childhood. Hannah transformed the neglected house with efficiency and care. She unearthed linens and curtains packed away in trunks, scrubbed floors that Levi had merely swept for years, and turned the overgrown kitchen garden into orderly rows of vegetables and herbs. The twins appointed themselves her helpers, carrying water and pulling weeds with varying degrees of success. Sarah, quiet and bookish, organized Levi's modest library and began teaching little Emma her letters, setting up a makeshift schoolroom on the back porch. The sight of them there, heads bent together over a slate, often stopped Levi in his tracks when he returned from the pastures. In the evenings, they gathered around the table for meals that made Levi realize how poorly he'd been feeding himself for years. Afterward, there might be reading aloud from one of his books, or music if Hannah played the small piano in the sitting room that had sat silent since his mother's death. "You're good with them," Hannah remarked one evening as they sat on the porch after the children were asleep. The spring night was cool but not cold, the stars brilliant overhead. "Especially James. He worships the ground you walk on." Levi shifted uncomfortably under the praise. "He's a fine boy. Smart, too, picks things up faster than some grown men I've hired." "He needs this," Hannah said softly. "A man to look up to, they all do." She hesitated. Their father was, not unkind but distant. The store consumed him, especially when it began to fail. There were weeks when they barely saw him. Levi watched her profile in the dim light. She rarely spoke of her husband, and he'd never pressed. "And you? What did you need?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "I needed security for my children. Robert provided that until he couldn't." She turned to face him. "He was a good man who made poor decisions. I can't fault him for trying, even if we're living with the consequences." "You loved him," Levi stated, not a question. Hannah's smile was sad. "I respected him. We were compatible. Love." She looked away. "Love is a luxury when you're a woman with limited options." The frank admission hung between them, shifting the air like the promise of a storm. Levi wanted to tell her that she deserved more than compatibility, that she should never have to settle for mere security, but the words felt presumptuous on his tongue. Instead, he said, "When I was building this place, I thought I had all the time in the world to find the right woman." The years slipped by somehow. Always another season, another herd, another excuse. Hannah's hand found his in the darkness, her touch light but steady. Life rarely follows the paths we imagine for ourselves. "No," Levi agreed, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't quite name. "But sometimes it leads us somewhere better." May turned to June, and with it came the busiest time on the ranch. The branding had to be done, requiring extra hands that Levi hired from surrounding ranches and passing cowboys looking for temporary work. Hannah rose to the challenge magnificently, cooking for a dozen hungry men 3 times a day, managing her children, and still maintaining the house. The cowhands, initially skeptical of the widow and her brood, were won over by her cooking and quiet dignity. They taught the twins to lasso fence posts and showed Sarah how to recognize different bird calls. Even gruff old Peterson, Levi's longtime foreman who visited during Roundup, was seen bouncing little Emma on his knee while telling her stories of the old days. "Your missus is something special," Peterson commented to Levi one evening as they checked the day's tally. "Never seen a woman handle ranch life and 5 young-uns with such grace." "She's not my missus," Levi corrected automatically, though something in his chest tightened at the assumption. "She's just staying until she gets established in town." Peterson gave him a knowing look. "If you say so, boss. But a blind man could see how you look at her, and how she looks back when she thinks nobody's watching." Levi dismissed the observation, but found himself paying closer attention in the days that followed. He noticed the way Hannah's eyes sought him out when he entered a room, how her smile softened when it was directed at him. How had he not seen it before? Or had he been afraid to see it, knowing their arrangement was temporary? The branding ended successfully, and the ranch settled back into its routine. But something had changed between Levi and Hannah, an awareness that hummed in the air when they were together. A careful dance of not touching accidentally, of conversations that skirted dangerously close to feelings neither was ready to name. June brought afternoon thunderstorms that transformed the landscape into a riot of wildflowers. During one such storm, with rain lashing against the windows and thunder rolling across the plains, Hannah found Levi in the barn, repairing tack that didn't really need fixing. "The children are napping," she said, pushing back the hood of her shawl. "Even James." The excitement of helping with the last of the branding wore them out. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face in stark relief, the high cheekbones, the determined chin, the eyes that seemed to see right through him. Levi set aside the bridle he'd been pretending to mend. "You shouldn't have come out in this weather," he said, but there was no admonishment in his tone, only concern. "I needed to talk to you," Hannah replied, moving closer. "Alone." Levi's heart hammered against his ribs. "About, July is approaching. We've nearly reached the 2-month mark of our arrangement." Her voice was steady, but her hands twisted together nervously. "I've been thinking about what comes next." A cold weight settled in Levi's stomach. "I see." "No, I don't think you do." Hannah stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender she'd planted in the kitchen garden. "I'm not sure Pineridge is right for us anymore." Hope flared, dangerous and bright. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying my children are thriving here. James talks of nothing but ranching. Sarah has read every book you own twice over. The twins haven't had nightmares since our first week here. And Emma." Her voice caught. "Emma called this home yesterday." Levi swallowed hard. "And what about their mother? Is she thriving too?" "Their mother," Hannah said softly, "finds herself thinking of a future she never dared imagine. One where she's more than a housekeeper, more than an obligation. The next words tumbled out before Levi could reconsider. Stay, not for the summer, stay for good, all of you. Hannah's eyes widened. Levi, I'm not asking out of pity or obligation, he hurried on. I'm asking because this house was never a home until you filled it with your family. Because James is the son I always wanted. Because the twins make me laugh even when they're driving me half crazy. Because Sarah's quiet wisdom reminds me there's more to life than cattle. Because Emma's innocence is the purest thing I've ever known. He took her hands in his, suddenly unafraid. And because you, Hannah Norwood, have awakened feelings in me I thought long dead. I think I've been falling in love with you since you first stood in my kitchen making biscuits. Thunder crashed directly overhead, but neither of them flinched. Tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks, catching on her smile. I never expected this, she whispered. When Robert died, I thought my life was over, that I'd spend the rest of my days simply surviving for my children's sake. I never thought I'd find. She squeezed his hands. Joy, partnership, this feeling that makes my heart race when you walk into a room. Is that a yes? Levi asked, hardly daring to believe. It's a yes, Hannah confirmed, but the children, we should consider them first. This affects them most of all. Levi's smile was tender. Hannah, they've already claimed this place as their own. James asked me last week if I'd teach him to be a rancher for real. Sarah wants to plant a proper flower garden next spring. The twins have named every calf born this season. And Emma. He chuckled. Emma informed me yesterday that Duke needs a wife because he's lonely, just like me. Hannah laughed through her tears. Out of the mouths of babes. Smart girl, Levi murmured, drawing Hannah closer. She saw what I was too blind to admit. His hand gently cupped her cheek. I love you, Hannah. I love the family you've brought into my life. I want to build something lasting with you if you'll have me. I love you too, Hannah whispered, the words both foreign and perfectly natural on her tongue. And yes, I'll have you, Levi Blackett. We all will. His lips met hers as lightning illuminated the barn, sealing a promise more binding than any contract. When they finally drew apart, the storm had begun to subside, sunlight breaking through the clouds in golden shafts that seemed to bless their newfound understanding. That evening, they gathered the children in the sitting room. James seemed to sense what was coming, his eyes darting hopefully between the adults. The twins bounced with characteristic energy while Sarah observed quietly. Emma sat in Levi's lap, having claimed that spot as her right weeks ago. Children, Hannah began, Mr. Blackett, Levi has something he'd like to ask all of us. Levi cleared his throat, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been when facing Hannah alone. I've grown mighty fond of all of you, he said simply, and of your mother. I'd like it very much if you would stay here permanently, if you'd let me try to be a father to you and a husband to your mother. There was a moment of stunned silence, broken by Emma's innocent question. Does that mean you'd be our papa now? If you'd want me to be, Levi replied carefully. I know I could never replace your father, but I'd do my best to make you proud. James stood up, his young face solemn with responsibility. Would we take your name? Would the ranch be our home for always? Yes to both, Levi confirmed, if that's what you want. James looked at his siblings, a wordless communication passing between them, then turned back to Levi. Our father wasn't around much, even before he got sick, but you're different. You teach us things. You listen. His voice grew stronger. I think you'd be a good father. The twins nodded vigorously in agreement. Sarah, ever thoughtful, asked, and Mother, you'll make her happy. Levi met Hannah's gaze across the room, his heart in his eyes. I'll spend every day trying. Sarah smiled, a rare full smile that transformed her serious face. Then I think it's a very good idea. The simple ceremony took place in late July, beneath the old oak tree that stood sentinel by the creek that gave the ranch its name. The minister rode out from Pineridge, along with Hannah's cousin Eleanor and a handful of neighboring ranchers who had come to respect Levi over the years. Hannah wore a new dress of pale blue, sewn by Eleanor's skilled hands, with wildflowers in her copper hair. Levi, freshly shaven and uncomfortable in his best suit, waited beneath the tree with James proudly at his side as best man. Sarah, the twins, and Emma preceded their mother, scattering flower petals along the path with varying degrees of accuracy. When Hannah spoke her vows, her voice was clear and unwavering, her eyes never leaving Levi's. When he spoke his, promising to cherish not only her but the children they would raise together, many of the hardened cowboys present found themselves suspiciously misty-eyed. "By the power vested in me," the minister proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Their kiss was brief but tender, mindful of their young audience but filled with promise for later when they would be alone. The celebration that followed was simple but joyous. Tables set up in the yard groaned under the weight of food contributed by neighbors. There was music from a fiddle and harmonica, laughter and stories shared long into the evening. When the children finally succumbed to exhaustion, they were carried to bed by their new father, who tucked each one in with a tenderness that made Hannah's heart swell with certainty that she had made the right choice. Later, as they stood on the porch of their home, truly theirs now in every sense, Hannah leaned against her husband's solid strength. "Happy?" he asked, his arm secure around her waist. "More than I ever imagined possible," she replied, watching the stars emerge above their land. "Do you know what James said to me this afternoon? He said he can't remember the house ever being empty, though he knows it must have been. He said it feels like we were always meant to be here." Levi kissed her temple, breathing in the scent of wildflowers in her hair. "He's right. This house was waiting for you, for all of you, just as I was, though I didn't know it." Inside, the children slept peacefully. Outside, the night was alive with the sounds of the land they would nurture together. And between them, in the perfect understanding of two hearts that had found their home in each other, a promise of days stretching endlessly before them, each one filled with the precious gift they had found. A house full of life, a family bound by love, and a future bright with possibility. As autumn approached, bringing with it golden light and crisp mornings, the Blackett Ranch flourished under the care of its expanded family. The house, once merely shelter, had become a true home marked by children's laughter, Hannah's music, and the profound contentment of a man who had found his purpose not just in the land, but in the people who shared it with him. And if, in the years to come, the family grew by two more children, a daughter with Levi's blue eyes, and a son with Hannah's quiet dignity, it only confirmed what they had discovered that fateful spring day when a broken wagon wheel had led them to the most precious discovery of all. That sometimes life's detours lead exactly where we need to go, and that love, once found, makes even the widest open spaces feel like home.